The Passive Income Playbook. Build streams that work while you sleep. Written by Ronnie Rowland. Published by Growth Literacy Lounge. Why earning while you sleep is less about luck and more about leverage. In 1984, a young man in San Diego began selling homemade instruction manuals for fixing vintage motorcycles. He mailed photocopied pages to readers across the country. What started as a side hustle quickly evolved into something far more powerful, a recurring stream of income that arrived whether he worked that day or not. His breakthrough wasn't mechanical, it was psychological. He had discovered, without using the term, passive income. This book begins with a simple observation. Most people are trained to earn like factory workers in a digital age. They exchange time for money, 1 hour at a time, believing that effort and reward must always move in lockstep. But beneath the surface, a different pattern has emerged, quiet, consistent, and often misunderstood. It is not based on intelligence, status, or inheritance. It is based on systems. Passive income isn't just a financial concept. It's a reordering of assumptions about work, time, and value. And like many transformative ideas, its power lies in being counterintuitive. It rewards those who stop trying to earn more by working more, and instead begin building assets that operate without them. The chapters that follow trace the shape of this pattern. They uncover the psychology of leverage, the architecture of systems, and the surprising habits of those who earn differently. Not through genius, but through design. Because the most revolutionary ideas are rarely loud, they are just quietly effective. Chapter 1. The Tipping Point of Wealth. How one small shift in mindset can unlock financial independence. In 1997, a man lived in a small Midwestern town. He wasn't wealthy, but he wasn't struggling either. He worked as an insurance adjuster, clocked in at 8 a.m., clocked out at 5 p.m., and believed, as many did, that hard work over time would lead to a comfortable retirement. Then something changed. One evening, Steve stumbled across a forum thread on royalties, specifically, how musicians and authors continued earning long after the work was done. That single encounter set off a chain of decisions that would reshape his financial trajectory entirely. What Steve experienced wasn't luck or genius. It was a tipping point, a moment where a subtle shift in perspective triggered a series of actions with disproportionate impact. Every movement has these moments. In social epidemics, they are where a trend catches fire. In financial life, they mark the transformation from reactive income work for paid to proactive wealth money that works independently. This chapter is about that moment. Not the climax of wealth, but the turn, the precise instance when a mind unhooks from convention and glimpses the architecture of passive income. These turning points often appear unremarkable at first, a podcast, a lunch conversation, a sentence in a book. But their effect is compounding. They operate like the virus in a social epidemic, not because they are loud or dramatic, but because they spread quietly, shifting behavior beneath the surface. Consider the analogy of temperature and ice. Water remains liquid all the way down to 32 degrees Fahrenheit. Drop it 1 more degree, and suddenly the system transforms. The molecules haven't changed, but their behavior has. The same principle applies to wealth building. For years, nothing looks different. The job is steady, the expenses predictable, the paycheck reliable. But the environment is saturated. The desire for autonomy, the exhaustion of linear work, the curiosity about other ways, these act as heat under the surface. And then, with the right exposure, the system freezes into something entirely new. The framework solidifies. That shift is not about abandoning work but about redefining the relationship to it. The traditional model places work and income in a one-to-one exchange, time in, money out. But passive income, through digital products, rental real estate, automated businesses, or investments, breaks that equation. It decouples labor from reward. Once that mental decoupling takes root, everything else begins to align. Decisions shift. Risk tolerance expands. Creative energy reallocates. It's not a change in behavior first, it's a change in lens. Sociologists refer to this phenomenon as a cognitive rupture, a moment where the frame breaks, and the individual can no longer see the world the same way. What once seemed stable now feels stagnant. What once seemed impossible begins to feel inevitable. After that point, it's not a matter of motivation, it's momentum. Steve, for instance, didn't become a millionaire overnight. He began small, licensing photos he had taken on weekend hikes, building a basic online course, testing a $7 digital guide. Each step was modest. But each step was leveraged. The real shift was internal. Steve no longer asked, "What can I do to earn more this month?" He asked, "What can I build that earns when I sleep?" That question, small in phrasing, profound in implication, became his flywheel. It's the same question driving creators who license content, investors who live off dividends, and entrepreneurs who build systems rather than sell time. The tipping point of wealth is not a product. It is not an investment or a program. It is a pivot in perception. Those who reach it rarely return to the previous model. Not because the old model was broken, but because once leverage is seen, dependency loses appeal. Work becomes optional. Time becomes elastic. And sleep, for the first time, becomes profitable. Chapter 2: The Outliers of Income. Why the Top 1% Think About Money Differently. In 2006, a man stumbled onto a niche blog about Amazon affiliate marketing. At the time, he was a junior copywriter earning a modest salary in a small advertising firm in Chicago. He had no Ivy League education, no family wealth, and no experience in finance. But within 3 years, James was earning more in passive commissions than he had ever made in his day job. His peers called him lucky. Economists called him an anomaly. But there's another word that fits more precisely: outlier. Outliers, in the classical sense, are statistical exceptions, individuals or phenomena that fall outside the expected range. In the realm of passive income, they appear to operate on an entirely different axis. Their decisions, though not louder or more forceful than the average person's, are calibrated with a different internal compass. They don't just work harder, they interpret value differently. The most curious aspect of outliers in passive income isn't their tools or tactics. It's their assumptions. While most view money as something earned through labor, these individuals see money as something that can be engineered. This mental shift, from income as a reward to income as a structure, reorients their entire financial behavior. The average person saves to spend, the outlier builds to scale. Take, for example, the way outliers approach risk. In 2010, 2 software developers released a simple budgeting app on the iOS store. They priced it at $2.99. Over the course of a year, the app earned them over $90,000 in residual income. What's notable is not the coding itself, dozens of similar apps existed, but the fact that they viewed their weekend project not as a hobby, but as a potential revenue asset. That lens, the ability to perceive opportunity in what others overlook, is a signature trait. There's also a pattern of early adoption. Outliers in passive income spaces are not necessarily first, but they are often early enough. They don't wait for the market to confirm the trend. They act based on directional intuition. When cryptocurrency was still seen as fringe, when YouTube monetization was a novelty, when ebooks were dismissed as inferior to print, these individuals were already creating, investing, or building. They didn't need mass validation, they needed viable systems. One of the most striking examples came from a couple in their early 30s who built an empire around printable wedding invitations. While most assumed Etsy was for hobbyists, they saw it as a frictionless storefront with global reach. They invested time into design templates, customer reviews, and automation tools to deliver digital products instantly. Within 18 months, they had created a recurring income stream that required no shipping, no storage, and minimal upkeep. Their edge wasn't brilliance. It was different thinking. The cognitive leap they made, seeing a $7 product as a potential foundation for a 6-figure system, was not accidental. It mirrored a pattern found across multiple domains. People who build lasting passive income streams tend to ask better questions. Not how can I earn more? But, how can I create something that earns without me? That shift, subtle on the surface, is transformative in practice. Outliers in passive income often share another trait: they are comfortable with asymmetry. They accept that 9 out of 10 efforts may fail if the 10th pays off disproportionately. This approach is antithetical to traditional career paths, which reward consistency and discourage volatility. But passive income is a nonlinear game. A single digital asset, licensing agreement, or investment can outperform years of salaried work. The outlier is not gambling, they are playing a different game entirely. Ultimately, the outliers of income aren't just breaking rules. They're operating with a different rulebook. While most people chase security, they chase systems. While many view time as the primary currency, they treat time as a seed, plantable, scalable, and detached from immediate harvest. And while others sleep to rest, the outliers have found ways to earn in the silence. Chapter 3: Broken Clocks Still Tell Time. Why Conventional Advice Delays Your Freedom. In 1965, the average American family had one breadwinner and could afford a home, a car, and a vacation on a single income. Fast forward to the 21st century, and two-income households often struggle to keep up with inflation, debt, and the rising costs of modern life. Yet, remarkably, the advice dispensed in classrooms, boardrooms, and bank offices remains largely unchanged: go to school, get a good job, save 10%, and retire at 65. This guidance, though well-intentioned, resembles a broken clock. It still tells time. But only twice a day, and never when it matters most. What's more revealing is how tenaciously this outdated narrative persists. Not because it works, but because it once did. It's a kind of cultural inertia, where systems and mindsets lag behind the pace of real-world shifts. The rules for financial success have evolved, but the collective script has not. The disconnect begins with the foundational myth that income is best earned through labor, exchanged hourly, taxed annually, and accumulated incrementally. This model worked in an economy built on industrial repetition. But in a world of digital assets, algorithmic trading, and 24/7 marketplaces, the model has lost relevance. The game has changed, yet many are still playing by the old instructions. Consider the story of Priya, a software developer from Toronto. She graduated with honors, landed a job at a global firm, and followed the traditional savings playbook. But 5 years in, she realized something jarring. Her salary was increasing, but her time was vanishing. Her income was tied to her presence to her productivity, and her productivity to a treadmill she couldn't seem to exit. Then she stumbled across a simple browser extension she had built in college. She refined it, released it on a freemium model, and within a year, it was generating thousands in monthly passive income. That one shift, a digital asset decoupled from her hours, unlocked a different path. The lesson wasn't about coding. It was about recognition. Priya saw what many overlook: the traditional advice she had followed was designed for a different era. And more critically, that advice could only ever lead to modest stability, not time freedom. Economists often refer to path dependence, the idea that once a system is set in motion, it tends to continue along the same trajectory, even when better alternatives exist. This explains why so many people cling to outdated financial strategies. They aren't irrational. They're following the map they were handed. The trouble is, the terrain has shifted beneath their feet. Passive income challenges this path. It refuses to conform to the labor for money equation. It suggests a different axis entirely, one where time and money no longer move in direct proportion. It invites individuals to build systems that operate in their absence: rental properties that pay monthly, royalties that renew automatically, algorithms that trade, content that circulates, capital that compounds. And once this paradigm is glimpsed, the conventional path starts to look less like wisdom and more like delay. The irony is that conventional advice isn't harmful because it's wrong, it's harmful because it's slow. It's a long route in a world where shortcuts, when smartly leveraged, exist. Not shortcuts in effort or ethics, but in architecture, choosing systems over tasks, assets over hours. Take the example of a man who spent years driving for a rideshare company. Every week he earned, spent, and repeated. Then he began filming his driving experiences, uploading videos, and earning through ad revenue. The hours behind the wheel remained the same, but the income structure had changed. One stream became two. The second required no repetition, only reach. In a world evolving this fast, following slow advice is a silent risk. The clock may still be ticking, but the hands point to a time that no longer exists. Those who recognize this shift early are not merely lucky. They are attentive. And in the new economy, attention, not effort, is the ultimate leverage. Chapter 4: The Domino Effect: How Small Streams Can Flood Your Future. In 1979, a physicist published a paper that illustrated an obscure but powerful principle. He found that a single domino could knock over another domino 1.5 times its size. By the 13th domino, the force could theoretically topple a structure as tall as the Eiffel Tower. The initial action, a finger flick on a 2-inch tile, seemed trivial. But the cascade that followed was exponential. What mattered was not the size of the first move, but its positioning and repeatability. This is the logic behind building multiple streams of passive income. The small ones, often dismissed or overlooked, carry disproportionate potential over time. Not because they are large in isolation, but because of the sequence they create when stacked intentionally. One income stream leads to two to four, and momentum builds not linearly, but exponentially. The power lies in the compounding effect of multiple sources working in parallel, even when each stream appears modest at the start. In 2013, a high school teacher named Lena began selling lesson plans online. At first, the earnings were minor, $8 here, $12 there. But over time, her library of digital content grew, and so did her customer base. The lesson plans she had written once began paying her every month. Encouraged by the results, she expanded her content into short video tutorials, templates, and eventually an online course. Each asset became a new stream, and together they formed a network of income that operated independently of her daily effort. By year 5, her teaching salary had become optional. The original plan? Sell one PDF online. The result? Financial freedom built on compounding small wins. Traditional thinking rewards big leaps, the business that scales overnight, the investment that triples in value, the lightning in a bottle idea. But the reality of passive income often looks very different. It begins with tiny, unglamorous wins. A $5 ebook. A $15 t-shirt design. A $30 affiliate commission. These are the early dominoes, small, unimpressive, and easy to ignore. But their real function is not in their size. It is in their leverage. Psychologists describe this as the aggregation of marginal gains, the theory that success is not the result of one major improvement, but of hundreds of small advantages stacked over time. Athletes use this principle to shave milliseconds off their performance. Investors use it to compound small returns into major gains. Passive income builders use it to create streams that trickle, pool, and then flood. What makes this domino effect so counterintuitive is the illusion of slowness. In the early stages, progress feels incremental. The creator earns $30 one month, then $40 the next. There's no drama, no fanfare. But behind the scenes, something critical is happening. Systems are being put in place. Automation tools are running. Emails are nurturing leads. Digital content is circulating. And most importantly, confidence is compounding alongside capital. At a certain point, quantity creates its own quality. 10 micro streams earning $100 each become a $1,000 monthly foundation. But the psychological impact is just as significant. The builder realizes that income no longer depends on presence. Time becomes uncoupled from effort. And with each additional stream, risk is spread thinner, resilience grows stronger, and dependency on any single source diminishes. Consider the way ants build colonies. No individual ant can construct a complex tunnel system or protect the queen alone. But through the repeated contribution of tiny actions, dropping grains of sand, signaling paths, shifting dirt, a sustainable ecosystem is created. Passive income streams behave the same way. A single stream is helpful. A colony of streams is transformative. The temptation is to wait for the perfect opportunity. But in the new economy, perfection is the enemy of momentum. What matters is that the first domino is set in motion. With each one that falls, the next becomes easier to topple. And before long, what began as a single flick becomes a self-sustaining sequence, one that continues long after the hand that started it has moved on. Chapter 5: Choice Architecture. Design systems that make money in your sleep. In the early 2000s, researchers at a university cafeteria discovered a strange phenomenon. By simply rearranging the placement of food, putting fruit at eye level and desserts on lower shelves, they dramatically altered the dietary choices of students. Without adding new items or offering incentives, the behavior of the group shifted. People made healthier decisions, not because they had more willpower, but because the environment was subtly engineered to guide them. This idea became known as choice architecture, the science of structuring options so that the desired outcome becomes the easiest one to choose. The same principle applies to passive income. Systems that work while one sleeps aren't built on constant discipline or perpetual hustle. They're built on intelligent design. Just as cafeteria trays can be organized to nudge someone toward an apple over a cookie, digital and financial systems can be structured to nudge money toward growth instead of stagnation. The architect, in this case, is not designing buildings but pathways, channels through which effort is minimized and return is maximized. Take the example of Devin, an independent artist based in Austin. Like many creatives, he struggled with inconsistent income. Every month was a reset. Then, rather than selling individual pieces of art one by one, he shifted to a subscription model, $5 per month for exclusive content and digital wallpapers. Over time, his subscribers grew from 30 to 300. His revenue became predictable. His workload remained the same, but the structure changed. The choice to design a recurring system, rather than chasing one-off sales, became the difference between instability and sustainability. The critical insight here is not that Devin worked harder. It's that he restructured how his work interacted with the world. He didn't need to be present for every transaction. His system replaced his presence. This is the essence of choice architecture and passive income, design choices today that reduce the need for choices tomorrow. Economists often refer to this as default bias, the tendency of people to stick with preset options. It's why retirement contributions increase when automatically deducted. It's why apps with auto-renewing subscriptions retain customers longer. People rarely change the default. In the realm of wealth, this means that systems with baked-in automation, automatic transfers to investment accounts, email sequences for digital products, royalty payments from licensing deals, succeed not because they are flashy, but because they reduce friction. Friction is the enemy of consistency. Any system that requires daily action, frequent monitoring, or complex decision-making becomes vulnerable to human error. Passive income builders who succeed long-term understand this. They prioritize front-loaded effort to create back-end simplicity. They automate emails, schedule content, license assets, or invest in dividend-producing funds not for the thrill, but for the relief. Once the system is built, the returns are no longer dependent on mood, energy, or bandwidth. One illustrative case came from a woman named Clara who built a series of digital templates for corporate teams. She hosted them on a platform that delivered the files instantly upon purchase. She also integrated a review system, a referral link, and a follow-up sequence that offered upsells. Clara didn't just build a product, she built a flow. Every buyer was nudged toward becoming a repeat customer, not by persuasion but by design. Her system, not her sales pitch, did the heavy lifting. Design is leverage. It multiplies output without multiplying effort. And in the passive income landscape, design decisions are often invisible until they are felt. A course that sells while its creator vacations. A blog post that continues generating ad revenue years after publication. A licensing deal that deposits monthly checks without renegotiation. These are not accidents. They are outcomes of systems that favor scale over spontaneity. The goal isn't complexity. The goal is predictability. When money flows through structures instead of schedules, freedom becomes more than a concept. It becomes a configuration, one quietly guided by the choices made at the start. Chapter 6: The Invisible Workload: Why the Setup Stage Feels Harder Than It Should. In the early stages of building a passive income stream, the work feels disproportionate to the results. Hours are poured into writing, recording, coding, or configuring, and yet, for weeks or even months, there may be no visible reward. It's not that progress isn't happening. It's that progress is silent, unseen. Much like the initial phase of bamboo growth. Bamboo, when first planted, spends nearly 5 years developing its root system underground. During that time, there is little to show for the labor. No towering stalks. No signs of rapid growth. But in the 5th year, something remarkable happens. The bamboo shoots upward, sometimes as much as 90 feet in 6 weeks. The visible explosion is merely a reflection of the foundation built invisibly. This principle applies with striking accuracy to passive income systems. The setup phase, writing the ebook, building the course, automating the emails, configuring the storefront, feels lonely because it exists in a vacuum. There is no applause, no feedback loop, and often, no paycheck. The work is deeply unglamorous. And for those conditioned by immediate rewards, it can be psychologically disorienting. The payoff comes, but only if the builder persists through the quiet. One software developer, based in rural Oregon, spent 6 months building a niche tool for digital marketers. He had no launch party. No press coverage. The initial release brought in only 2 customers. Yet, he kept refining. After year 1, his tool brought in $1,400 per month. By year 3, it was earning more than his full-time job. The workload hadn't necessarily increased, but its visibility had. What changed was not the effort, but the timeline. This phenomenon isn't rare. It's misunderstood. People often underestimate the ramp-up required for something to become self-sustaining. There's a bias in modern culture toward immediacy. Fast likes. Instant payments. Viral growth. But the architecture of reliable, enduring passive income is rarely instantaneous. It is delayed gratification in its most distilled form. Behavioral scientists call this the effort-reward delay, and it creates a gap between input and recognition. The gap, if not anticipated, becomes the breaking point. People abandon projects not because they don't work, but because they don't work yet. The emotional stamina required to continue working without results is what separates temporary creators from long-term earners. Even in ecosystems outside economics, the pattern holds. In agriculture, there is a dormancy period between planting and harvesting. In education, there are years of unseen preparation before any title is earned. In fitness, the first visible results lag far behind the first effort. Passive income is no different. The groundwork is invisible until it isn't. The system is unrewarding until it scales. This dynamic makes the early phase of building passive income feel unfair. The reward is not proportional to the labor. But that is precisely why it works. Most people stop early. The barrier to entry is not technical, it's psychological. The silent phase filters out those who chase speed over structure. One woman, an illustrator in Berlin, published digital clip art on an open marketplace. In the first 6 months, she made less than $200. But by year 2, she had hundreds of assets indexed by search engines. Her store began generating thousands in monthly royalties. No ad spend. No active promotion. The setup had done the heavy lifting. Her success wasn't a surge, it was a sedimentation. Layer by layer, effort had built scale. Understanding the invisible workload is not just comforting, it is essential. It reframes struggle as part of the process rather than a signal to quit. It reveals that the invisible is not empty. It is formative. Like bamboo, the system is preparing to rise, just not on the schedule that most people expect. And when it does rise, it doesn't just reward the effort. It multiplies it. Quietly. Consistently. Without further negotiation. Chapter 7: The Talent Myth Reversed. You don't have to be brilliant to build wealth. In the 1950s, a psychologist launched a long-term study tracking over 1,500 children with exceptionally high IQs. He believed that intelligence would predict extraordinary achievement in life. But as the decades unfolded, something unexpected happened. Many of the high IQ children went on to lead average, even unremarkable lives. Meanwhile, a number of wildly successful entrepreneurs, artists, and innovators came from outside the test group, people with ordinary intellect, but extraordinary persistence, timing, or resourcefulness. The experiment inadvertently revealed a powerful truth: talent is not destiny. This insight becomes particularly relevant in the world of passive income, where popular narratives often celebrate genius, the brilliant coder, the finance wizard, the early tech adopter. But the real drivers of success in this space are not brilliance, but behavior. It isn't the complexity of the idea that matters most. It's the consistency of the execution. Consider the story of Elena, a mother of two living in a suburb outside Minneapolis. With no formal business training and no technical background, she began designing printable planners and selling them online. Her designs weren't revolutionary. They were clean, functional, and customizable. What separated her from others wasn't skill, it was system. Elena committed to uploading 5 new designs every month, optimizing titles and tags for search visibility, and engaging with her customer reviews. After 18 months, her digital storefront was earning more than her previous full-time job. The work didn't require genius. It required rhythm. There's a persistent myth that success must be complex, that only the highly gifted can design systems that generate income while they sleep. But in reality, passive income rewards simplicity, clarity, and scale more than sophistication. The creators who quietly dominate on platforms like Etsy, Teachable, or Amazon Kindle aren't the ones with the flashiest resumes. They are often those who find a repeatable format, meet a consistent demand, and iterate with discipline. Researchers call this the proximity principle, the idea that outcomes are more often tied to being close to the action than to being the smartest person in the room. In the creator economy, this principle plays out through persistence. The early YouTuber who posted 1 video per week, the author who released short books every quarter, the podcaster who published without fail every Tuesday, these are the outliers not because of brilliance, but because of frequency. A parallel can be found in agriculture. Farmers don't need to reinvent how corn grows. They need to understand timing, soil, and distribution. Similarly, passive income builders don't need to invent complex algorithms. They need to identify patterns of demand and create systems to meet them repeatedly. This also explains why perfectionism is often a barrier. Those waiting for the perfect product or the flawless launch frequently lose to those who release, test, and refine. The talented perfectionist may ship 1 masterpiece a year. The disciplined practitioner might ship 20 good enough products, 10 of which quietly generate reliable returns. In this way, volume beats virtuosity. The most successful passive income creators often start with what they already know: lesson plans, recipes, design templates, stock photography. They leverage platforms, automate delivery, and trust that cumulative value will outweigh individual brilliance. They do not need to invent the next big thing. They need to build something small that scales. This democratization of opportunity may be the most powerful feature of passive income. It lowers the gate. It welcomes the consistent over the gifted. It rewards clarity over cleverness. And it levels a playing field that, in other arenas, remains tilted toward the naturally talented. The talent myth persists because it flatters. But it obscures the more empowering truth: systems beat stars. And in the quiet world of passive income, where leverage is more powerful than labor, success often belongs not to the brilliant, but to the builder. Chapter 8: Network Effects and the Wealth Multiplier. In 1973, sociologist Mark Granovetter published a now famous paper titled The Strength of Weak Ties. His argument challenged conventional wisdom. Most people assumed that strong social bonds, family, close friends, tight-knit communities, were the key to career advancement and opportunity. But Granovetter discovered something surprising. It was the weak ties, acquaintances, loose connections, peripheral relationships, that were more likely to open new doors. These were the people who occupied different social circles, had access to different information, and introduced new pathways. This phenomenon, though sociological in origin, offers profound implications in the financial world, especially in the construction of passive income. While the traditional narrative of wealth building often focuses on individual brilliance or self-reliance, many of the most scalable and sustainable income streams grow through collaboration. It's not just what is built, but who is brought into the system, and how the system, in turn, amplifies itself. In the digital economy, this concept takes on a new name: network effects. A network effect occurs when a product or service becomes more valuable as more people use it. Social media platforms thrive on this principle. So do online marketplaces, affiliate programs, content-sharing platforms, and community-driven products. But the same logic applies to personal wealth-building strategies. A passive income system built in isolation is limited by one person's time, ideas, and reach. A system plugged into a network expands exponentially. Consider the case of Jordan, a photographer who started offering online tutorials. At first, the audience was small, mostly friends and followers. But then he partnered with another creator who specialized in editing software. Together, they bundled their courses, cross-promoted to each other's audiences, and shared revenue. What began as a solo product became part of a growing ecosystem. Then, affiliates were brought in. Each affiliate promoted the course bundle in exchange for a commission. More students enrolled. More testimonials surfaced. More creators wanted to join. Jordan wasn't just selling a course, he was building a networked income stream. In this context, the wealth multiplier effect becomes apparent. Each new participant, whether a partner, a customer, or a promoter, adds value to the system for everyone else involved. Unlike traditional business models, where labor scales linearly, network-based income scales geometrically. More nodes mean more exposure, more data, more feedback, more leverage. The psychology behind this is equally revealing. Humans are wired for reciprocity. When individuals collaborate, cross-promote, or co-create, they are tapping into age-old social instincts. And yet, much of the personal finance advice in circulation today is built on individual optimization: budget better, save more, invest wisely. Rarely does it acknowledge the role of social capital in accelerating outcomes. Network effects also explain why certain creators or entrepreneurs reach a critical mass seemingly overnight. It's not that their product was infinitely better. It's that it moved through a web, not a pipeline. One YouTube creator interviews another. A blogger quotes an expert. An Instagram post links to a podcast that links to an affiliate product. The connections do the work. One of the clearest examples comes from the world of self-published authors. A novelist, publishing on a digital platform, writes a compelling series. But instead of marketing it alone, she joins a collective of writers who cross-promote each other's work. They share email lists, run joint giveaways, and bundle box sets. Their audiences overlap and expand. The author's royalties multiply, not just because of content, but because of connection. Passive income, then, is not just about building things that run without constant attention. It's about plugging those things into systems that scale without central control. And the most powerful systems are not built in silence, they are built in community. The wealth multiplier is not magic. It is math, applied socially. When the loop is closed, when collaboration feeds growth, and growth attracts more collaborators, the system sustains itself. Not through isolation, but through integration. Not through genius, but through networks. Chapter 9: The 10,000-Hour Shortcut. Mastery isn't required. Leverage is. In 1993, an 18-year-old student began selling used electronics on early internet forums. He wasn't a tech prodigy. In fact, his knowledge of electronics was limited to what he picked up tinkering with his home stereo system. But what he did understand, intuitively, and long before the market caught on, was distribution. He saw where attention was shifting. By finding early communities and learning just enough to solve someone's problem, he created a system that paid him again and again, long after the effort was spent. This kind of story disrupts the dominant narrative. For decades, the prevailing belief has been that mastery is the gateway to success. 10,000 hours, as the theory goes, is the threshold to world-class skill. Practice, persistence, perfection. And while that may be true for concert pianists or Olympic athletes, the passive income ecosystem tells a different story, one where leverage often outperforms mastery. The modern creator or entrepreneur doesn't need to be the best at any one thing. Instead, they need to know how to stack simple skills, apply them in high-leverage environments, and use systems to magnify their reach. In this environment, the shortcut isn't about skipping work. It's about skipping redundancy. Consider a woman who launched an online course teaching basic spreadsheet skills to small business owners. She wasn't a data scientist. She didn't have a PhD in computer science. But she understood one specific pain point: busy entrepreneurs who needed quick wins without jargon. Teresa packaged her lessons, automated the delivery, and licensed her course to business coaching networks. She didn't teach everything, only what mattered. And that precision became her edge. This approach aligns with what behavioral economists call the minimum effective dose. In medicine, it's the smallest amount of a drug needed to produce a desired outcome. In passive income, it's the smallest effort needed to create a scalable result. A person doesn't need to be an expert in podcasting, video editing, or SEO. They need to understand how to use each tool just enough to create assets that continue to work while they sleep. Leverage is what transforms this approach from casual to transformational. In traditional income models, effort and reward are tightly coupled. 1 hour of work produces 1 hour of pay. In leveraged models, the same hour, spent creating a digital asset, building a sales funnel, or deploying code, can yield returns for weeks, months, or years. Mastery would take too long. But leverage collapses time. A striking example can be seen in the rise of no-code platforms. Individuals with no formal training in software development are now building apps, marketplaces, and automations using drag-and-drop interfaces. These platforms lower the skill barrier, but they don't lower the outcome. What once required a team of engineers can now be built over a weekend by someone who simply knows where to click. This shift has redefined what it means to be qualified. In the passive income world, qualifications are measured in results, not resumes. A digital creator with no formal education can earn more through one successful YouTube automation than a tenured professor with decades of experience. It's not about who knows more. It's about who builds systems that scale. Of course, shortcuts carry their own mythologies. They're often misunderstood as lazy or risky. But in reality, the most successful creators and entrepreneurs in this space are not cutting corners, they're removing unnecessary ones. They ask a different kind of question, not, "How can I master this?" but "How can I make this work with what I already know?" The answer, again and again, is leverage. Knowledge that's good enough, combined with platforms that distribute, automate, or replicate, becomes far more powerful than deep expertise locked in a single mind. Mastery still matters, in some contexts. But for those building streams of income that run without their constant attention, the game is not depth. It's reach. And the shortcut is not a cheat. It's the strategy. Chapter 10: The Stickiness Factor: What Makes Income Keep Flowing. In the early 1990s, a children's television show called Blue's Clues debuted with little fanfare. The budget was modest, the animation simple, and the format repetitive. But it quickly became one of the most effective learning tools for preschoolers in television history. The key wasn't production value, it was stickiness. The creators understood how to design content that stayed in a child's mind. Repetition, pacing, direct questions, and visual cues were used not just to entertain, but to anchor memory. What looked simplistic was actually engineered for lasting impact. Stickiness, in this context, refers to the elements of a message, or a product, that make it unforgettable, repeatable, and behavior-shaping. And while originally applied to ideas and communication, the same principle underpins the durability of passive income. Not every income stream is built to last. Many begin with excitement, generate a flurry of returns, then quietly taper off. The difference between a flash-in-the-pan success and a sustainable income engine is rarely brilliance. It's stickiness. The same principle plays out in the financial world with surprising consistency. A self-published author releases a book that spikes in sales during launch week, only to vanish from rankings within a month. Meanwhile, another author, whose book never reaches the bestseller list, generates stable royalties for years. The difference is not quality alone. It's structure. One book was designed for buzz. The other was built for longevity. Consider the story of Malcolm, an online educator who created a course on photography basics. Rather than relying on a single launch, he optimized for search engines, partnered with affiliate reviewers, and included free updates for enrolled students. His course became part of a content loop, shared by bloggers, recommended by algorithms, indexed by search engines. It wasn't the most advanced course, but it became the most accessible, and therefore the most frequently purchased. The structure made it sticky. Stickiness isn't accidental. It's a product of deliberate design. In marketing, it shows up in evergreen content, articles, videos, or lead magnets that remain relevant over time and continue to generate traffic or sales without additional input. In real estate, it's the difference between a trendy short-term rental and a long-term lease in a stable market. In investing, it's the compounding effect of dividend stocks versus the volatility of speculative assets. Stickiness creates reliability. At the psychological level, this concept aligns with what behaviorists call variable reinforcement. Humans are wired to return to experiences that offer consistent, if unpredictable, rewards. A blog that posts weekly may earn attention, but a blog that ranks on Google for a high-traffic keyword earns repeat visits without fresh content. A product that solves a persistent problem, without requiring ongoing effort, stays in circulation because people keep finding it useful. That's why many of the most successful passive income creators focus not on novelty, but on utility. A budgeting spreadsheet, a tutorial series, a licensing arrangement. These aren't glamorous, but they're sticky. They embed themselves in workflows, habits, and systems. They become default tools, not temporary fixes. Stickiness also relates to trust. People return to systems they trust, platforms that deliver reliably, products that do what they promise, services that maintain consistency. A seller who fulfills orders on time, responds to customer inquiries, and updates their product just once a year may outlast a competitor with flashier offerings but no system. The buyer doesn't need to be dazzled. They need to be reassured. Sustainability in the world of passive income is less about chasing trends and more about creating anchors. Products, services, or investments that stay relevant without constant intervention become part of the background noise of someone else's life, and that is where real income durability lives. When a stream is sticky, it keeps flowing. Not because it's the best, but because it's the one that stays. Chapter 11: The Passive Revolution, Rethinking the Meaning of Work and Wealth. In 1914, the Ford Motor Company did something unthinkable. It doubled workers' wages and cut the workday from 9 hours to 8. The decision was met with outrage from industrialists who believed longer hours equated to greater output. But Ford's experiment proved otherwise. Productivity soared, turnover dropped, and profits rose. The underlying idea was simple but radical. When the structure of work changes, the outcome of labor shifts. A century later, another transformation is underway. This time, it isn't driven by factory floors, but by cloud servers, automation tools, digital products, and decentralized platforms. The idea is not to reduce the hours of work, but to remove the need for hours altogether. At the center of this shift is the passive income revolution, a quiet but sweeping redefinition of how value is created and sustained. What makes this revolution different is that it doesn't resemble one. There are no protests, no formal declarations, no singular moment of upheaval. Instead, it happens in coffee shops, home offices, and browser tabs. It unfolds in the lives of teachers building lesson libraries, designers selling templates, investors deploying capital into yield-generating assets, and creators building monetized content channels. The movement doesn't march, it multiplies. This passive revolution is not about avoiding work. It is about unbinding income from labor. Traditional economies rely on a simple equation: time equals money. But new systems reject that premise. They replace linear input with scalable output. One video earns views long after it's uploaded. One course generates sales on autopilot. One investment yields dividends without daily attention. These systems change not only how wealth is built, but what wealth means. Sociologists describe this as a paradigm shift, a fundamental change in the underlying assumptions of a system. For generations, the dominant assumption was that labor was noble, and rest was earned. That scarcity was the natural state, and wealth was a rare exception. But what happens when technology, distribution, and automation democratize access to income-generating tools? What happens when average people build systems that outperform their jobs? One example comes from a man named Daniel who worked in retail for most of his adult life. Tired of long hours and unpredictable schedules, he began uploading royalty-free music to licensing platforms. His songs weren't chart toppers, but they were clean, useful, and easy to categorize, perfect for content creators looking for quick background tracks. Slowly, his catalog grew. One upload became 50. Then 100. Eventually, the licensing checks surpassed his retail salary. He hadn't changed industries. He had changed structure. This shift reflects a deeper truth, that time is no longer the most valuable currency, leverage is. Those who understand this begin to view effort not as something to exchange for money, but as something to invest in systems. A YouTube video, a real estate portfolio, a digital storefront, these are not hobbies. They are infrastructure. Importantly, this change is not reserved for a privileged few. In fact, the tools of the passive revolution are becoming more accessible each year. What once required a publishing deal, a warehouse, or a distribution network can now be accomplished with an internet connection and a few $100s. The barriers to entry are lower. The learning curve is flatter. The gatekeepers are fewer. The implications ripple outward. Work becomes optional. Retirement becomes irrelevant. Education becomes more about exploration than employment. And wealth becomes less about accumulation and more about architecture, the careful, strategic design of systems that endure. In the end, the passive revolution is not just about income. It's about autonomy. It's about choosing how to spend time, where to direct energy, and when to pause without fear of collapse. That choice, once a luxury, is quietly becoming a standard. Not through noise. Through systems. Not through force. Through design. A revolution, not of protest, but of permission. Take care and be well.